Howdy. Welcome to another show. So I'm going to be doing another review. Actually, there's a couple of videos here because they kind of tie in with each other. But to set this one up, well, let's just I'll get a few things out of the way first. A few announcements. Well, there's nothing really to announce. I'm hoping I'll be able to do at least one more stream tomorrow, Wednesday night, before the holiday kicks in. And then I'll be off for a little while. Probably won't be getting anything done until sometime next week. But other than that, I'm trying to catch up on some decent content that I saw here, and I'm trying to track down a Darth Dawkins conversation that was had. I can't remember if Clubhouse Debates picked it up or who had it, but he was having a conversation about evolution with somebody. And it was remarkably bad. He brought up Eugene Koonin again, and I'm trying to track that one down because there was something, I mean, it was Darth Dawkins, so he brought up something, that really made my eyes roll. Anyway, let me say hi to a few people in the live chat. God equals the square root of -1. Good to see you. AJ, hello. Will the king be joining us? I don't know that he will. I did what I could to tag him. In fact, I used both methods to tag him on this one, but I don't know. I haven't heard from him. So, but if he does show up, I wouldn't mind bringing him in for some comments. Michael Deaton, good to see you. Calvin Withen, good to see you. Let's see here. You guys were active while this was waiting. Stephen Hawley, good to see you. Let's see. Tyler West, good to see you. Wilberforce, damn, I wish I could join this stream. Wilberforce, are you involved in any of the Discord hangouts or anything? If you are, I'd be interested to know. I know. I think I've talked to you before on Clubhouse, maybe. I'm not sure. My apologies if it's a different username and I didn't put it together. I didn't remember. Sorry about that. Scuba Diver, good to see you. Space Lord, Manny Perez, Shapeshifting Monkey, good to see you. Mr. Lumpkin, James F, Rat Snake, Xerxes hates Darth. Yes, he does. Maya, always good to see you. And I think that's everybody. Bruce Smith, good to see you guys. Thanks for joining live. I don't know who else is streaming right now. I haven't been paying too much attention. I'm just trying to put mine out. Well, I can. So yeah, background on this one, don't really know. Other than that this happened on one of Darth's Discord channels, either in politics or politics and religion. For background on King Xerxes has been a YouTuber for a while, and I think he's been doing the Discord, and I'm fairly certain he's on Clubhouse as well. I don't know if he still is, but he kind of debates. For me, I kind of get there's a lot of similarities to the way that he debates some of the points that he brings up. They are kind of similar to T-Jumps, I think. He's also a chess enthusiast, and so I've seen him on Discord channels talking about chess and stuff too. But I've watched his channel on and off for a little bit, and I like some of his arguments, some of his stuff. But it was only a matter of time before and I don't know how many interactions he's had with Darth Dawkins over the months, years. I don't know when they first. I don't think this is the first time they've ever chatted, but he's in there, and he's definitely somebody that's made Darth Dawkins' stalker list because he brings him up, quite a bit. So. In fact, he brings them up in the next video that I have to share on this one. So I'm going to get into a conversation here, and yeah, I'm just going to run with this because Darth does something really, if I remember right, he says something really, well, that's not really narrowing it down. He makes a logical leap that I had not heard him make before. So we'll leave it at that. All right, let me swap this out. Unlike what I did before, I think last night I kept myself taking up all that space. Aegis is definitely not their first interaction. Yeah, I don't think it is, and I'd kind of like to see more of their interactions from the past because I imagine they were a little bit louder. And in this one, I probably should have known that this. I mean, it's definitely not the first one because Darth interrupts him a lot, and Darth will do that with people that he knows are wily, and Xerxes can be quite wily. So, all right, without any further ado, let me make sure the volume on this is turned up. Okay, so we're jumping right into it. So here we go.
as the single ultimate foundation of all that exists that is not himself and he is a mind?
I don't think that's a coherent concept.
What's that?
I don't think that's a coherent concept.
You don't understand it?
Okay, how is it is it incoherent to say that there is a single ultimate foundation to everything?
Maybe, maybe not. What I have a problem with is the
No,
mind.
no, no. I don't want to hear maybe or maybe not. What I want to, I want you to address the question. So that's dodge number one. Is somebody stipulating, whether you believe it or not, that there is a singular ultimate foundation of all that exists? Is that incoherent?
I don't think that in and of itself is incoherent. I don't believe that's the case.
Okay,
No
is that coherent?
I'm not sure. I don't even really.
Why ask it both ways? So, like, I didn't cut this off at the beginning. So there was the intro that Daz puts on his videos, and then this jumps right into this part where he's asking this kind of question about the single ultimate foundation, which also happens to be a mind, right? And that's the part that Xerxes responded to by saying, "Yeah, I don't know if that's coherent, right?" And now, if you'll notice that Darth Dawkins is wondering why he thinks the positing of a single source that is the foundation or the absolute foundation for everything is incoherent. Notice the property he took off that he's judging. And he's not letting Xerxes finish any kind of interjections. He's already removed the mind part. Well, what's incoherent about a single foundation for absolutely everything? Well, I don't know. I don't know that is. And this is where Xerxes is. I don't know that is incoherent. But that's not what he objected to. And that's not what Dawkins said at first. So Dawkins is automatically like this is amazing. Like he's kind of straw manning himself.
Really have a grasp on what it is you're
well,
asking.
You need to answer the question. You're dodging. So that's dodge number two.
No, I'm not dodging. I'm just saying I don't.
I'm getting my roll of duct tape out. You have already violated your commitment.
Violated your commitment. Shatterhouse, I think Xerxes has the full interaction on his channel. Yeah, I think he does. I didn't use that one. I don't think it's much longer because I watched them. I think I watched them both a few weeks ago, and I don't know that there's a little bit more preamble, I think, with this video. Plus, he stops it for his own commentary. So I went with this one because I think this is kind of closer to the source. Because I think in that video, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, Xerxes talks after, because he doesn't make it very long before Darth mutes and kicks him, but it's not before Darth manages to kind of step in it again, logically. But yeah, for anybody that is interested, the link to this video from Clubhouse Debates is available, in the description. But also, you should be able to track down King Xerxes with the tag that I used in this as well. But if you go to his channel, you can find his version of this. So. Yeah. Yeah, Darth basically makes him Cub Scout swear to answering his questions. Yeah, he's gotten worse about this. There's one video that I was listening to. I think it's the next one where he's just convinced. Darth seems to have this real problem distinguishing the difference between people being evasive and people being confused. And if they're evasive, that also equals lying. So if you're confused and hesitant to answer, you're contemplating your answer, you're being evasive, therefore you're being deceptive. So you're just a liar, right? Or you're slow. So
you can laugh all you want, princess, but you have violated.
What's with the homoerotic derogatories that you call me all the time?
It's not homoerotic, okay?
I don't know. It's a little weird to be called princess by a 60-some-year-old man. That's a little fucked up, right? Especially a guy who often accuses his enemies of catcalling him. So, I mean,
I could call you Kink Pukesies, which would be more fitting.
Ooh, man, you kiss your mother with that mouth, Darth? Man, the wit on this guy.
But you have already broken you have already, if anyone talks in here other than King Xerxes and myself, you will be server muted. Now, you have already broken.
And I don't know who that was. If that was like, it almost sounded like Parakeet bringing that up. I don't know who that was. Like, that's an ad hominem. Like, okay, he called him princess, and Xerxes said, what's with the homoerotic, the homoerotic insult, right? But Darth's flying monkey, whichever one that was, is quick to say, "Oh, well, you're using it at." No, he's not. No, Darth was the one that had to tack on the condescending, derisive usage of the word princess after making a comment to King Xerxes. So that doesn't get any criticism. And if anybody did anybody did offer that criticism, I'm sure Darth would provide the duct tape, as he's kind of fetishizing now. He's back to doing that on Discord.
Broken your promise already. You have dodged twice. Okay. I asked you a simple question. If one stipulates that there's a singular ultimate foundation of all that there is that incoherent? I want a simple, clear answer.
I don't know.
Okay. Then you're not in a position to say that the inclusion of a mind to that is incoherent.
Okay. Catch that? So okay, so if you don't know about this bag of properties here, right? If you're different on that, then you can object to this other thing that I tack onto it, right? Like, I just want to let everyone know, right? Like, okay, so first of all, what's incoherent about the notion that a guy spends an entire year collecting the names of good and bad children so that on Christmas Eve he can deliver presents to the good ones and coal to the bad ones, right? Is there something incoherent about the notion that such an individual exists? Like, no, not really. Okay, what if I told you that that individual is immortal and my uncle? Right? Right. As soon as you start tacking things onto it, things immediately start getting a lot harder to buy. So this is fascinating to me, because this is something where Darth is asking about a thing, right? Having the property of being the foundation of all stuff. And then when asked, challenging someone, well, do you think that there's something incoherent about positing such a thing? No. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's incoherent or not, right? Well, okay, fine. Now you can't object when I tack on the property that its name is Mandy and it lives in Florida, right? Like, this makes no fucking sense at all.
Well, a mind is the way in which we understand minds is it's a constant linear sequence of mental states.
Not
It's constantly
necessarily
fluctuating, constantly changing.
for human beings, it is.
Okay, well, I don't understand what a mind means outside of that context. So what does it mean?
Okay, well, God could have one thought that contains the truth value of all propositions, including future tense proposition.
Okay, so can we, including future tense propositions, so can you imagine a mind that has a thought that contains everything that any thought ever could hold in the past, presently, and ever in the future? No. Right. This something that usually comes about when these guys talk about this kind of stuff, when they try to compare this, they'll usually try to wiggle away from the analogy that God is a mind, right? It's one thing to say, really what they're saying is that there's a will, right? Because what they really need is a teleological explanation. They need to know that the stuff that's here was built, purpose built, right? The idea that it just occurred is bad, right? In fact, even if you posited the existence of a God that just built stuff just to do it, I think would probably be something that they'd rather not have, even though I think the kind of typical Christian excuse that God made people to, quote unquote, maximize his glory, right, is an example of something just making things just to do it. But that just could be me, right? But this idea that he has in his head of, okay, well, there's a mind that does this, like, analogically, it doesn't hold up, right? Do thoughts come unbidden to the mind of God like they do to us? And I really don't think that Darth has a good handle on this, because when you listen to him talk about how people think about things and the choices that they make and how they, in his words, choose to believe things, I think Darth thinks that the thoughts you think can be controlled by you. I really don't know that Darth understands that, like, it makes me wonder if I mean, I don't really have to wonder. Has he ever tried guided meditation or mindfulness? exercises before? My thinking is no, given his disposition. But if he were to do that, I mean, the basic, I mean, like mindfulness 101 is basically getting somebody acquainted with the idea that it can be especially nerve rattling for some people to sit down and kind of deal with the fact that their mind is running, 100 miles an hour. And you can't get those thoughts to stop, right? Most of us, I think, are aware of this. He probably is. But the notion of a mind somehow free of this would be completely foreign to us, right? Just eliminating that kind of basic idea of it starts to immediately break down this analogy of saying that it's a mind. I really think that the only purpose that mind, in big quotes, serves for these guys is that mind operates this position that it's a will, right? I don't really think that the mind, as far as like thinking thoughts and deal, it has intention and causal ability, right? But they don't want to think about the negative side effects or the challenges of having a mind or being a mind or whatever. And I think the only reason it's picked is because they want purpose implied in what they're talking about. So, and this is usually where Darth goes with this, because once he gets to this, then he wants to get into creator-creature distinctions, which is loaded up with a bunch of theological baggage and et cetera, et cetera. And most of it's predicated on this idea that and the interesting thing too is that if Darth is engaging in a conversation with somebody like King Xerxes, keep in mind that like somebody could try to say like, well, wait a minute, what if it is the case that a god, that there is this foundational ultimate, blah blah. Yeah, cool. Darth's not nowhere near that. What if it is the case, or could it possibly be the case that that's the no? Darth's arguments have been and always will be that it is necessarily the case that this being exists. It has to be. It's metaphysically necessary. Otherwise, nothing else follows, right? And in fact, nothing else follows in that way, right? So he's already. I think he's already kind of drowning in a lot of the implications of some of the things that he brings up. But I've rambled enough. AJ writes, they need to appeal to something with agency, right? Because the point is they need to know that something, we are here for a reason. We were designed and built with a purpose in mind. It's not just incidental. It's not just random. It's not a happy accident or an unhappy accident, whichever way you look at it. There's got to be a plan, and there must be, and if there's a plan, there's a planner.
So the point is, it's a mind that has one or more thoughts. Okay. Now, there's nothing incoherent about there being an eternal mind.
Are you gonna let me prod that a little further, or are we just gonna move on?
No, I'm watching you to give me your defense of atheism. So far, you're failing miserably.
Yeah. So
but Darth is giving a really bad example of what this being would be, right? Because he's not giving a defense of Christianity with this kind of argument, right? This is based, and he's actually kind of breaking down. He's sort of, snapping the axle on the on the whole this idea that you've got a metaphysical foundational thing, right? In Darth's head, right? He's got this wrapped up because it's larded up with theological BS, is that it has to be a will, a personality that chooses things and thinks thoughts and does things, right? It doesn't follow that even if there is something foundational to all things, that everything is in fact contingent upon one ultimate foundational source of something, that thing also need be a mind. Because those properties, even Darth, when he tries to bring these up, he usually will leave out the personal aspect of it later, once he's baited somebody into providing him with an alternative. I talked about this before. If he asks somebody, hey, what's your alternative to an eternal foundational absolute thing that never changes, blah blah blah, and this the foundation of all things, and somebody's like, it's quantum fields or overlapping energy, something whatever. And what's he do next? The cheat comes out. Aha, but it's not personal. You can't have a chat with it, right? It doesn't condemn people. It didn't talk to Noah, right? That's not what energy fields do, right? But if you just remove any of that kind of stuff, and this is where Darth can't really color outside the lines, pretend that the Bible is just stories, but assume that this notion of a foundational thing still exists upon which all things are contingent, but it's not a personality. Is that incoherent? Darth's quick to ask Xerxes, is it incoherent that this thing exists and it's a mind? As far as Xerxes is concerned, yeah, the mind part I think makes it incoherent, right? But if somebody were to ask Darth and turn it around on him and say, well, wait a minute, why add the mind part on there? Is there something wrong with this ultimate thing upon which all other things are contingent? Not be a mind. And then normally what I've heard when the conversations have ever gotten kind of close to that, it's usually, well, Darth's normal criticism is that, well, that doesn't resemble the God of the Bible, therefore I'm going to reject it because the God of the Bible is better, right? And then and sometimes we'll make some kind of half-assed almost appeals to ontology. Well, if we can imagine a God that's A, B, and C properties, one of the other properties that would make him even better is if he was a he, right, or a she, or had a mind, or was funny to talk to and, enjoyed a beer or whatever, those qualities make it better. And so I'll tack that on too. And that must be the case. It never ends.
I mean, right out of the gate, if this thing is a mind, an internal mind of that, and it knows all true propositions, that would include all counterfactual propositions as well, which would be an infinite regress. And then on top of that, if it's an internal mind, it can't change. So how does it actualize any state of affairs?
No.
Those are pretty good ones. The counterfactual one I think is kind of fascinating. I don't know that I've ever heard that one used before. I definitely have not. I don't think I've ever heard anybody bring it up to Darth. So I'm just going to keep playing this to see how Darth reacts to this.
Why would it be an infinite regress? Because regress would have to do with succession.
Well, yeah, but there's an infinite regress of factual, counterfactual claims.
No. If the mind of God knows all true propositions, it's not a regress. You're making a category error there.
Okay. Oh, God, that's not what counterfactuals are, though. Counterfactuals, you hold. I mean, okay, I don't know. Darth seems to think like, oh, well, no, for God, he just knows everything that actually is the case, so then he wouldn't have to worry about it. Well, no, God would know. I mean, a counterfactual is somebody correct me if I'm wrong. The counterfactual is like if this then that kind of thing, right? Like if this happens then that happens, or if that happened then this happens, kind of thing. And I think epistemologically that does lead to an infinite regress. Counterfactuals do that. I don't. Yeah, but Darth automatically seems to be going to the like, no, it doesn't matter because ontologically the only things that exist are the things that God made, and God knows what all those things are. Therefore, that's not a problem, right? But Darth opened this up for Xerxes to talk about this thing being a mind, right? So if we're talking about the mind of God, we end up having to wonder about its epistemology. I don't think Darth does. I think Darth just thinks the epistemology of a God is identical to an ontology, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but I kind of wonder if this God has thoughts that come unbidden. Is its epistemology identical to ontology in the sense that what it thinks is real? That everything that pops into its head. And I think that would actually be a more sophisticated explanation for reality. The reason that there are bad things is because there are certain things in God's subconscious. Like we exist in God's dream, and occasionally it's a lucid dream where he comes in and tries to make things a little bit better either for himself or the people that he encounters. But otherwise it's just kind of random. Does Darth have that kind of imagination? No.
Okay, whatever the hell that means. But you said
Look, it is a category error. When you talk about a regress, you're talking about a cause and effect sequence. Okay, the bottom line here is, do you have a defeater instead of double talk that there is no God?
Yeah, I mean, that always depends. Max the Confessor, he got this from Craig because Craig denies actual infinities exist, so God's mind can't have infinite beliefs / propositions in their mind. Yeah, maybe that's where I've heard that before. In fact, maybe it was Alex Malpass talking about counterfactuals. I would be interested to try to explore that with somebody who's a little bit better versed, either Alex Malpass. I don't know if Nathan Orman would know better, but I am kind of interested in bringing up that point and looking at that better. Darth Bonson writes, in the case of God, since he is exclusive, his necessity implies the exclusion of all other explanations. How could they possibly have analyzed all other options? And since they cling to the KK, they would also have to analyze their own analysis ad infinitum. Probably, but wouldn't they just use the excuse that it terminates in God? I mean, and I've actually heard some of these guys when trying to justify this, we'll end up going with the old, well, it's all a mystery, and it's not my position, it's God's position, right? I could be wrong about it, right? Which is a weird thing for, especially to come from a presuppositionalist. Like, well, no, if the assumption of God is the foundation of knowledge, then you shouldn't be wrong about anything. The fact that you still can be wrong about something might raise a little bit of a problem with the necessity of the assumption of God in order to know anything, or why that would be the foundation of knowing things. But I digress. So, hello, Pat Lowinger. Good to see you. Jack Burden. Infinities don't exist and God is eternal. Yeah, go figure.
Yeah, you previously defined him as eternal, and if he's eternal, he can't change. If he can't change, he can't affect anything. If he can't affect anything, he can't create the universe.
Why can't an eternal being change?
A change is a transition in states of affairs. It requires time.
Okay. Well, you just stepped into the bear trap.
Darth thinks that Xerxes is in trouble because Xerxes just spoke the word time.
Okay. Now, if change requires time, what is time?
The measurement of change.
No, that would be a metric for time. That wouldn't tell me what time is.
No, that's what time is.
Yeah, dude, listen to me. This is an area that I've recently spent a good amount of time studying. You made a big mistake bringing up time.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
So I want you to give me a coherent, single sentence definition of time, not things that are associated with time. I want you to give me a single sentence definition of time.
Time is the measurement of change.
No. You did it again. All you're talking about. Okay, so what you're talking about.
So I think this is interesting that, I'm not surprised that Dawkins started immediately getting cringy over this whole thing, but Xerxes gave him an even more concise definition than even Webster's gives, right? Webster's dictionary would define the measured or measurable period during which an action, process, or condition exists or continues, duration. So, yeah, it would be you have a period of things happening, right? Which means they're going to be different from the start, once they're finished. And this I think this has been brought up before. People have brought up the some of the inherent contradictions with trying to posit the idea of an infinite being or an eternal being, right? Especially if you're trying to say now. One of the qualities that's usually attributed to God, not as commonly amongst apologists online, is God. Usually you get the omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omniscient stuff, but immutability is a big one, that God doesn't change, which is an interesting one because I tend to find that more of these types of apologists avoid that one, right? The notion of an immutable God is not something that I think a lot of these guys like, because it raises lots of problems, especially if they try to do things like Darth tries to talk about God's redemptive plan of man having something to do with God manifesting a perfect expression of his love, which means that in order to achieve a perfect expression of his love, an expression of his love heretofore had been less than perfect, right? The idea of a perfect being negates the idea that anything it does is anything other than perfect, other than complete. those kinds of contradictions usually will pop up, like stepping on a rake in the yard, and hitting yourself in the handle. But here we go. Darth now, I think, wants to get into a conversation with Xerxes about, I can't remember where he goes with this. If this is going to get into infinite regresses or if he's just going to get lost in a semantic kind of thing. My guess is it's the semantic thing.
About is a metric. Okay. So what you really should say, rather than invoking a metric, because a metric, okay, is an overview of change. So what you really mean is time change? Think carefully before. Think carefully. Do you hold to the relational view of time?
Okay. Xerxes is just repeating Aristotle's theory where time is consequent to change. So time literally just is a measurement of change, which is probably incompatible with modern physics, to be honest. Yeah, it probably is. And now he's getting into the relational theory of time, which is not something that I've ever studied, so I don't know that I'll be able to comment on this so much. Let's see here. Yeah. Sean writes, Darth reads 2 blogs from Christian quacks on the concept of time equals bear trap. Yeah, and that's why I have a hard time with this kind of stuff. In the same way that Darth lards up a lot of his stuff with theological concepts that he doesn't unpack for people beforehand. He just sort of assumes that everyone's got the same knowledge. Some of the stuff when he starts talking about like his ideas about time, I don't think he's going to some like an astrophysicist like Sean Carroll for that. I think he's going to an apologist who's written an article, quote unquote, debunking in the name of Jesus that hideous atheist Sean Carroll. So, yeah.
What is that?
You don't know?
No.
You just said, is it your position that time is change?
Time is the measurement of change.
No. A measurement is
okay. No. DD knows nothing about infinity. He once asked about a hypothetical planet being infinitely far away from Earth, which is just stupid. Immutability is probably the easiest divine attribute to prove. I agree. But if you buy that, you have to think that a lot of the Bible is non-literal. Exactly, and that's the problem. It's very difficult to be a biblicist or well, you can be a biblical inerrantist in the kind of Vatican II way, where you believe it was the overall message in there is essentially true. Give or take some factual errors, misrepresentation problems, scribal things, all you just kind of hand wave that away, right? But if you're an inerrantist in the sense that you believe that everything it says is like somehow factually correct, you can't, right? Because if you believe that God's immutable, then you have to reject basic narratives in the Old Testament, like Moses talking God out of giving up on the Israelites. It says that God changed his mind, right? In fact, it does that quite a bit in the Old Testament, where God is convinced to do otherwise, right, or softens his heart or something like that. So yeah, I would agree. The immutability one would probably be relatively easy to substantiate, but you can't because of the narrative.
An add-on to time. It's a metric. There can be different metrics of time. Okay.
Okay.
See, you're making a mistake. You see, you do a lot better if you had actually studied the issue of time, but I don't think you have. So
that's a bold statement coming from Darth, because I don't think that Darth has actually studied the topic of time. I think that Darth has studied apologists dealing with arguments from physicists about time. So this I'm Darth Dawkins. Trust me, I've read a lot of pamphlets from a lot of ministers, so I can tell you exactly what you need to know.
Okay.
What is time?
The measurement of change.
I know that's the third time you've repeated that. I told you why that's incorrect.
No, you didn't.
Is time fundamentally the indefinite progress of events?
I don't know what the hell that means.
Okay, well, that's a dictionary definition.
I don't know that is. I mean, the Webster's definition of time does not say that. So
The indefinite progress of events.
Yeah,
Progress
indefinite
is just another word for
It's
change.
okay. It's time. Okay, when you say
yeah, I don't think it says anything about it being indefinite. It just says that but it does say something about it. Duration of events, progress, which would mean change from one state to another.
Does change have to occur first before there can be a metric? How do you have a metric first?
How do you have a metric first? Does he really think that time is just a metric? Like, this is fucking bizarre to me.
Yeah, so when I say that change requires time, what I mean by that is that when things change, that's a transition between states and affairs, right? Transitions
Okay,
are
so
from point A to
okay.
point B. We would measure that with time.
Right.
That's how
Oh,
we
Okay,
conceive
so
of that
so what
transition.
what you're talking about is called the relational concept of time. Are we
Cool.
clear?
Glad to know.
Okay. So is time fundamentally relational?
I don't know. Probably.
Okay. Yeah. We're not going to do this. Okay. Either time is relational at its core or not.
It's one or the other.
Seems that way to me.
Okay. Is that a yes?
But I'm not giving you like a. I don't know.
Okay,
what the case of the fact of the matter is. I'm just telling you what I think about it.
Xerxes, you are an arrogant, prideful.
I think it's bizarre that Darth fishes for those. Like, I want a yes or a no when he's basically gotten a yes. Right. Xerxes just said, sounds good to me. So why not just roll with that, Darth? It's funny to me that Darth can't take even a small win. Right. Like, I think it's weird that, and I know it's not that he can't remember what people said, because he'll try to track the stuff down. Right. You just said sure thing. Like, but he wants, like, he can't give up. Like, he wants to, like, get in the final shot. You are going to tell me, it's not enough that you're answering my question. You are going to answer it my way. And I'm not giving up until I get it my way. Right. Like, like, I mean, he did call him princess. I mean, this is, that's pretty triggered here.
Full idiot. But when I'm asking you precise questions, all I'm getting is, I don't know, it could be, it seems that way. You're not so arrogant now. You're fumbling all over yourself. Now, you're taking the position that time is the relation between events. A metric, okay, would be something that's an overlay to change or the relationality of events. Okay. Now, so you said change requires time, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if we have an event that causes something, and then the result, which would be a secondary event, is that time, or is time some type of metaphysical environment or conveyor belt upon which change can take place?
It's the fire in which we burn. I'm going to go with Space Lord.
That's a weirdly worded question.
No, it's not. It's not, because Newton believed in absolute time. That there has to be an absolute. Now, is time when there is an event and a second event?
What?
If there's a linear transition between events, that would be time.
Okay. If there's only one event, does that entail time?
That's not coherent. There can't just be one event. There has to be a transition from point A to point B in order for it to be called an event.
Okay, so here's the problem.
Thing isn't happening if it doesn't start and stop.
You just screwed yourself, and let's see what a dishonest person you are. Okay.
Okay.
So
how is Darth going to get? I really want to see how he's going to pull this one off, because how are you going to convince anyone, like, okay, now I've got you, right? Like, it's fairly clear to anyone, I think, at this point, that Darth Dawkins and Xerxes are not really talking about these terms in the same way. Like, their background on this topic is not the same. Mostly because, Darth pieces a lot of this stuff together from the backs of, crazy pamphlets from, like, creationist museums and stuff. But That being said, even when he's got this stuff right, the problem with him, amongst a lot of the other problems, is that you can never entirely be certain how much of the stuff that he's talking about is based on sort of a standard understanding of a topic, or if he's picking and choosing an understanding from, say, the Middle Ages or the early church, or a kind of heterodox, maybe quasi-creationist kind of astrophysicist or something. That's my big issue with this guy, is that I can hear, even though I can't identify a lot of what's happening with the way he's trying to present his knowledge about time. It just really sounds like he has just cherry picked a lot of different things and combined them together. Um, and let's say that he hasn't. Right, like the fact that this doesn't seem cohesive at this point, and he's not really making an effort to make this, to try to get onto the same plane, right? Every attempt to explain, every time he explains a new thing, it's in response, it's built into a question he's asking Xerxes, so he can just prove that Xerxes doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And then if Xerxes doesn't supply him with an answer, for some strange reason, Darth is going to crow and say, aha, Xerxes lied again, which is a weird way to try. That's a weird own to pursue, when he could just be pursuing, like, aha, Xerxes doesn't know what I'm talking about. I think the problem here, though, is that I think Darth probably learned a long time ago that I don't think he can do that with confidence. He can't accuse somebody of ignorance, because he himself is ignorant about so many other topics. So what he'll end up doing is trying to do his usual thing of psychologically frustrating a person until they delay enough, or they try to ask questions back to get clarification, and then he can accuse them of being evasive, running out the clock, and then call them a liar, right? And then he looks good. So it's just kind of a virtue signal to himself, which is especially sad. Doing a little Arrested Development here, Jody. Darth, now you've screwed yourself, Xerxes. Narrator, Xerxes didn't. Let's see here. Penrose said some provocative things about time and space both entirely lose their scale in the absence of events. So the heat death of the universe, where everything is vastly huge, becomes indistinguishable from the state of the Big Bang. Trippy. Max asks an interesting question. What does this have to do with Xerxes' original point? We got into time because Xerxes said God can't believe infinite propositions, and then Darth randomly argued this involves time, lol. Yeah, and consider the fact that this originally hinged on the fact that when asked initially about what Darth put out there, which was the foundational thing, which in and of itself is a mind, Xerxes' reaction was that seems like an incoherent entity, right? And then Darth immediately pivoted to what's incoherent about an absolute foundational thing upon which all other things are contingent upon. But, right? However he puts it. That's not what he posited before, right? He immediately changed it, right? And now that they've finally kind of gotten it, then Darth then goofed up and was like, well, hey, just because because you're not going to commit one way or the other to the existence of that thing as posited as being coherent or incoherent, you surely can't have an opinion if I tack on another property like it thinks for itself. It's a mind. Well, of course you could, right? Anybody could say, like, okay, well, now that's getting a little bit weird, right? Anybody could speculate about a foundational thing upon which all things derive and depend. But when you say it's a personality, and at one point showed up as a human being, popped out of Mary, wandered around for 33 years, only to be executed by the Roman government, to come back from the dead, right? Save people's souls, tootle around, ascend into heaven, and then kickstart, whatever after that. That's a big difference. That's where they started. And now, but Dawkins is just gleefully chasing this time discussion right down a rabbit hole. This is a guy that accuses people of rabbit trailing, and that's all he's done with Xerxes so far. He rabbit trailed into time instead of dealing with the original contention, which was positing this thing what is it incoherent or not? Now they're trying to get into this, and when Xerxes gave his reasons for it, like, well, you're talking about an immortal thing, right? It sounds to me like an immortal thing wouldn't be capable of change, and if it's not capable of change, how did it create things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And here we are.
So then, in order for there to be time, you said it's relational. So the first of when the first event occurs, there's no second event for it to be for it to occur in time. You just said causation can't occur with time. So the first event would be.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, CP. Time only exists because matter is changing states. Time literally arises because matter changes forms. Right. But in the case of a god, it would be immaterial. God's immaterial. So, I mean, that does, I mean, he is usually speculated to be timeless, which still tracks, right? If he's material, then he's timeless, because if time emerges from that, then that's it. But then God makes something material that then changes over time, right? But then I think we end up getting right back into that issue of whether or not you can, this issue of immutability in God starts becoming more problematic for the Christian. They'd have to start revising some things.
Chronologically prior to the second event. So before the effect comes into being, then there can't be a first event or a first cause under your view, because it wouldn't be time, because time is relational.
Yeah, that's literally what I believe.
So your position, I just explained to you why your position is incoherent. Now you can play dumb, but that will be the end of you if you play dumb.
I don't know that he really actually got to what Xerxes' original objection was, but
just showed you an absolute defeater for your position. Now, either you're intelligent enough to understand what a devastating blow I laid for your position, or you can play dumb and look foolish before everyone in the room.
Devastating blow. Careful, Darth. You did just call him princess earlier.
You said at its core, time is relational between two events. Okay.
Actually, you said you demanded that he accept the definition that time is relational.
Okay. So if there's not two events, if there's not a relation, then there's no time, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So you said there can't be causation without time. So how does the first event occur when it's not in time?
I don't believe there was a first event.
There has to be. Okay.
No,
in fact, and yeah, it does. Let me tell you why. All right.
This should be good.
Because Graham Oppie it's called the Oppie principle.
Good for Oppie.
Okay. Yeah. So the point is, in the Oppie principle, if there is a second event, right, there has to be a change in the first state, okay, in order to bring a second event. Okay, so there has to be a change, and then there is a first event. But you said causes cannot happen without time.
I don't think that's what. Is that the Oppie principle? I don't know. I haven't read Graham Oppie. I like it when he brings that stuff up. Well, I've got one of your disciples of devilish atheism right here saying something. I don't think I'm willing to bet. I'm about 65% certain that he's probably misrepresenting that or totally misunderstanding that. Maybe he's not, but I'm just not convinced. Like, especially the way he explained that. I don't know what he's doing with that.
But you define time as relational between two events. So before there's a second event, there wouldn't be time for causation. So your definition of what cannot be just destroyed your position on time.
No, it didn't.
Okay, have a nice day. You're done. Okay, this is why this guy's a retard. I just annihilated his position, and so rather than admit it, you go, "No, you didn't. No, you didn't. I didn't say that. You did. You didn't. No, you didn't." So he just outright lied that he got eviscerated. He simply
Yeah, he was eviscerated. Right? He wasn't disputed. He wasn't proved wrong. He wasn't educated. He wasn't corrected. He was eviscerated. I love the language this guy uses. He was eviscerated. I ran over him with a combine, bro.
We said causation cannot occur without time. Okay. We all heard him say that, right, folks?
I didn't hear him say that. I heard you suggest that. I heard you draw the conclusion that that's what Xerxes meant, and then accused him of saying it.
Folks?
Well, wait. I think he understood what you were saying, and then he tried to retreat to sort of like.
Okay. Did we not all hear him say that there can't be causation without time? Right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Now, when I asked him to define time, he defined it as relational between two events.
Yes, he did.
There has to be a second event for there to be time. Okay? But you see, when we have the cause, when something is a cause, there has to be a change that takes place. Okay? But before there's a second event, okay, there's no relation. In order for there to be a relation, you have to have two events. So he's defining time relationally. But you see, before the second event occurs, and we have a first state where there is a change.
I feel like at this point, Darth is even confusing himself. Like I'm not following what this is. Like I think CP explained it better when he said, in fact, he's saying it here. It's exactly opposite. Time can't happen without cause, right? Like if it depends on a change in states of matter, I'm not sure how, like what Darth is saying here kind of goes along with that. Like I don't even know what he means anymore about these states. Like I think he's talking about states like. Is he talking about Montana and Wyoming at this point? This is just so fucking bad.
There's not a second event yet. So time can't exist.
Yeah, and I think he understood what you were pointing to him and that it was a problem, which is why he tried to reject the notion of a first event. And it sounded like he was going to like infinitism or something.
Well, you didn't just talk. You didn't say that. I didn't hear anything. Did you hear anything? I didn't say that. Did you say that? Do you see what a train wreck this guy is? He's so dishonest.
Well, maybe don't put words into people's mouths and then act like that's exactly what they said. Like all time is relational. Xerxes never said that. You demanded he give you an answer to the question, does he believe time is relational? And his initial responses seem to be sure, as if he was just going along with that for the sake of moving your Q&A session along. I mean, it's amazing to watch a guy fuck up something as basic as a conversation.
Honest that I just unpacked his view of time and I annihilated it. He said time is relational between two events, and without time, there can't be causation. So the first cause cannot be because it's not in time, because there's not a second event in order for there to be a relation for time to exist.
Okay. Sure thing. But if time, I really don't, I don't know what he's doing. I want to accuse him of almost like reifying time, but I don't think that's what he's doing. I just don't think that I really don't get this. Like it's better to me, time is better understood as changes in states of matter, and it's an observation of that change, right? Like that would be time, the observation of that change. This idea that like whatever he's doing makes no sense, because it seemed like he was accusing him of trying to say that it was merely a metric. I think. Like I'm not sure where he's at with that. I would be curious to know where Darth reads this stuff, or watches this stuff. This sounds more like he watches this stuff. And if anybody in the chat has anything good, like let's see what CP says. Darth is right at the end, but only to gaslight his opponent. Yeah, if you say so. Yeah, I gotta say. Darth annihilated a view Xerxes never had. Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is the worst thing about it. Like, if Warren were here, this would be the point where it'd be like, well, you guys just need to have a conversation with Darth, if you want to suss this stuff out. But you can't. If you wanted to have a conversation with him about, he's spent so much time getting into the weeds of all the different apologetic arguments, whether it's young Earth creationism, intelligent design, arguments about physics, arguments about time, all this kind of stuff. That it's really kind of hard to actually have a discussion with him about, maybe what he actually believes. In fact, I think it would be kind of interesting to have that discussion with him, to have a discussion with him where, not a discussion, but an interview, an actual interview where you can kind of sit down and ask him. You don't get into an argument, but you basically ask a series of questions to try to suss out what it is he actually holds to. Ask him key questions about his ideas of salvation, his ideas of grace, his ideas about pneumatology, soteriology, harmatology, those kinds of things, and see where you get with it. My guess is he doesn't have the patience to go through it and kind of like present to the best of his ability a kind of individual systematic theology. My guess is he would just blow that off. And if I invited him, my guess would be he would tell me to, in his words, fuck off. It would not end well. Yeah, I think he would use it as, even if he accepted it tentatively, he would use it as an opportunity to try to bait somebody and insult somebody, instead of actually like, here's what I believe, and I'm going to explain this as you ask questions about it, and go from there. That would make it easier. And the reason I bring that up before I get into this next video, somebody, and if they're watching now, please remind me. I don't remember when this happened, but somebody reached out to me in a comment on one of my earlier videos, Darth videos, and asked me, and I thought it was a really good suggestion. They said something to the effect of, I'd be interested to know what you think about some of this stuff in terms of Darth's theology, because you bring this stuff up about certain theological entailments that Darth doesn't take into consideration when he throws some of these concepts out. And, they basically were like, it'd be interesting if you did a video where you could kind of go through those kind of step by step. And so I took that to heart, because I thought that was a good idea. And I sincerely did start looking for it. But the problem is, and this kind of goes to guys like, not Darwin's Greatest Hits, but the Darth Dawkins, the YouTube user that does the website, Darth Dawkins test or whatever, where he does a multiple choice test, and if you answer, no matter how you answer the question, you're wrong. That's the problem. The more I started looking into it, be like, okay, well, if I go back and try to get, so for instance, I want to get an example of what Darth believes in terms of revelation, right? If I go back to the conversation that I had with Mike Fall and the video that I did on that, Darth brings up this idea, a third category of revelation that I have never heard of, right? There's not just general revelation and special revelation. He believes in an innate revelation and attempts to explain this to Mike Fall. I've never heard him touch on it again after the fact, at least not that explicitly. And so I would be interested to see if somebody asked him that question, do you believe in a notion of innate revelation, that all people know about this at a certain point of neurological development, and they already have basically the gospel message built in. It just unpacks as soon as their conscience comes online, for lack of a better expression, and then they have to decide whether or not they're going to accept the God of the Bible or deny it and be unrighteous, because that's how he explained it to Mike Fall. But I don't know if he's consistent enough to hold to that, so I wouldn't be able to break it down. So while I was trying to contemplate that, I'm like, well, that wouldn't ever work. What would be interesting would be to have an invitation go out for somebody to interview Darth now and ask him follow-up questions on what he believes in terms of revelation, grace, salvation, synergism, monergism, all these kinds of concepts, and try to figure out where he's coming from, and then nuke him with contradictions as soon as he starts contradicting himself. So This one happened probably. It might have happened in the same room, but Darth. It's in one of Darth's rooms, and I think it's the same one because some of the same participants are here. But he's just talking to somebody else, and I don't know if it was because of his conversation with Xerxes, but he's still a little ticked off. So here we go.
Then they're few and far between to come in here and defend their atheism and challenge Christian theism. Notice how, were you here when Xerxes?
Thanks, Spooky. Yep, Darth Dawkins debunked. Yep, it's on his. And yeah, and because of those questions and because of the he has clips demonstrating that, like, hey, what's the answer to this question? And it's multiple choice. And if you click on one, he'll give you a timestamp of Darth saying, like, nope, that can't be the answer to it. If you go back and answer the question a different way, it's still wrong, and he's always got a timestamp to a video or an audio response of Darth saying, hey, nope, that doesn't work, and here's why. It's kind of amazing. I should actually probably touch base with Darth Dawkins debunk, because if anybody's actually come close, I mean, he mapped that out, at least in terms of his website. I should check and see if he's got any kind of notion as to whether or not if he's got any way of kind of stitching together a semi-coherent, comprehensive example of Darth Dawkins' theology.
He said the concept of God is incoherent. Were you here for that, Yves?
Yeah, I was here.
Yeah, and so when I said to him, well, is it incoherent to say that there is a singular ultimate foundation to everything that exists that is not itself? Is that incoherent?
That's not what you said at first. Darth is misrepresenting himself again. Max, lately Darth has been saying jazz music and all of psychology is shamanistic and by implication demonic. Believing in that must explain why you need to treat him like a baby to talk to him. Well, he is the guy that says syncopated rhythm is of the devil. But he also only thinks that syncopated rhythm is demonstrated through drumming. So yeah, clearly not a music lover.
What was he going to say? Yeah, that's incoherent. Well, why would the inclusion of a mind make that incoherent? Well, he tried the routine saying, well, a mind would be a succession of thoughts. Well, yeah, for creatures, right? Because we're not omniscient, right? We're contingent beings.
Okay, but what does that have to do with this? See, again, he's going to get into this thing like, oh, okay, well, that's a problem. Oh, well, we're creatures, and he's a creator. So there's obviously, so now there's a distinction. Thanks, Jack. This is Didi would have been one of the town elders on Footloose. Yeah, he probably would have yelled at John Lithgow's character for being too soft, especially after they kind of realized the error of their ways.
Okay. Why would God's mind have to operate sequentially? Why?
Right, but if you're going to ask those questions, then why bother calling it a mind at all? Right. This gets to the issue that he seems to be having, right? Like if you want to use the analogy that this God is a mind, and this mind and issues of the mind come up, right? And he's like, well, what makes you think that it has to have these problems? What makes you think it's a mind of these limitations? We're not really talking about a mind then. You're not talking about a mind. You're talking about a supernatural personality that has will. That's it. Because anything else that somebody is going to raise an issue with, well, if it has a mind, doesn't mind entail like that it be embodied? Well, not this one. Well, doesn't a mind also usually entail like the notion that thoughts may come unbidden to it? Not this one. Okay, well, it's eternal. Don't thoughts normally occur in sort of a linear way? I mean, there is kind of a progression. Not this one. Okay. So I mean, with all the exceptions, right? Like with all the exceptions that you have to put into place and all the things that you have to, basically wave away, it's becoming less and less useful to refer to God as a mind, right? It's just a will. There's something out there that wanted things to be this way, right? Mind comes in handy if you want to try to because behind a will is usually something capable of thinking, capable of planning. But this thing that Darth's putting out there wouldn't be capable of planning because it's thought every thought that can be thunk. Sorry. What do you do with that? What? How do you put that into any kind of perspective?
Well, it wouldn't have to, but then, eventually, I just wonder why we're calling it a mind.
Because a mind is what we refer to that has a will, has some state of cognition.
Yeah.
Are you an atheist? Are you an atheist?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
This is going to be good. Max the Confess. You can be contingent and omniscient, probably. Yeah, I think this is interesting because when Darth says something like, "Well, hey, what would God have to do in order to change your mind?" Right? Or if he didn't do it, if it was another apologist, what would God need to do in order to get you to believe in him? He would need to make me omniscient, right? I mean, the kind of God that I think that Darth is talking about, right? In order for me to know what that God is, to really know it, given what my limitations are, right? I can't verify an omniscient God, right? Eventually, I'm going to reach a point where I can't verify the things it claims to know. I can't verify its omnipotence because I'm not going to be able to verify things it can't, things it can't do. I'm not going to know, right? Other than to say, well, you could know it within to an extent that it's logically possible or impossible. Again, I don't think that that's entirely possible either. And you couldn't really know that it was omnibenevolent, right? Because if benevolence for that God isn't bound by time, right? It's not bound by our idea of acting with benevolence, right? Or acting in a way that we can love one another and love God with all our hearts and souls is confined to a linear existence, which means we have to do good things in the here and now. But God's conception of acting benevolently would be split away from that and would be based on trying to maximize the greatest good, unbounded from time, which would mean maybe possibly, right? And this is an apologetic for problems of evil, allowing certain kinds of evil to happen in the here and now in order to allow for a greater good that he knows is coming, right around the corner. So the more you do this kind of stuff, the more this breaks down. The only way that you could really know that God is if it made you omniscient, I think. Please disagree with me if anybody thinks that I'm, just talking on my ass with that one.
Why?
So this guy said that he said yes to the question that he's an atheist, and Darth has asked him why. Watch Darth at this point. I remember this one. Watch Darth lose his shit over the answer.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's a necessary being. That's basically my line.
Yeah, that's not an answer to my question. That's a dodge.
No. Well, I mean, that's my only answer to the question.
Was that well then you don't have an answer to the question, do you? That was a dodge, what you just said.
Why? Right? I mean, if that guy is dealing with the God that Darth is talking about, and the God that Darth is talking about is by definition a necessary being, and he doesn't believe that one exists, that would make him an atheist. Right? That's what he doesn't think that being is real. Ergo, he's an atheist. And Darth, well, that's a dodge. Why? Right? Does Darth think that there are other concepts of gods out there that this guy needs to deny? Is there another God? Are there gods that exist unnecessarily? Right? Like,
are you going to be honest enough to admit that that's a dodge? You didn't tell me why you're an atheist. You just gave me a definition of an atheist.
Okay, so now that's a definition. By definition, an atheist is somebody who doesn't believe that necessary beings exist. That's interesting.
Oh, you're asking why I think there's no necessary being?
Dude, don't play stupid with me. That's the fact.
This is Darth playing stupid with himself. Like he literally just tripped over his own feet here.
Fastest way you're going to get server muted. You see this? You see, folks, this is exactly what they do. Okay, this is precisely what they do. They play dumb. Oh, let me see. Let me try to figure out. Is this what you asked me?
All right. Well, there's no being for which the sentence X does not exist entails a contradiction.
Excuse me?
There's no being for which the sentence X does not exist entails a contradiction.
What does that? What does that even mean?
It means you can say whatever you want.
Listen to me. Oh, really? You can? So anything is possible?
Well, that was half a sentence.
Is anything possible?
In the future.
That's not what he was going. That's not where that guy was going. But now, Darth has an opportunity to straw man another person, so he's going to go with it.
Sure. Yes.
No. Okay. See, here we go again. More dishonesty. Okay, you know the future?
No, I'm just saying anything in the future is logically possible.
No, we're not talking about logically possible, sir. Stop changing the parameters of what I say. You see, folks?
Stop changing the parameters of what I said. Well, yeah, but it's perfectly okay for Darth to change the parameters of what he just said, or the parameters of what other people said. He even changes the fact that the fact that they said them. Like when he was convinced that Xerxes said he only believes that time is relational. When Darth rhetorically badgered him into accepting a yes or no response, demanding a yes or no response to the question, do you think time is relational? And Xerxes' response was sure. And then Darth wasn't happy with that and demanded a yes or no, right? Like, and also changed his parameters, even at the beginning of this one. Well, Xerxes couldn't answer my question. What's incoherent about the existence of a foundational being that's also itself, or something, however he put it. It's like, well, that's not even how you put it then, right? But you also left out the mind part at the beginning of this one when he's talking to his cronies. Like, what the fuck, Darth? Like, if you're going to actually relate the story to people, make sure that you tell them what Xerxes or anyone else objected to. It wasn't just the foundational being; it was the foundational being, which is also a mind. And maybe don't leave out the embarrassing part where you told him, well, because you can't commit to whether or not that thing's incoherent or not, you won't mind if I smuggle in these other properties. You can't say anything about that, which is absolutely just mind-bogglingly stupid. It's childish to do something like that. I mean, he's 60 years old. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, like, I mean, even halfway, some halfway smart kids, some witty kids, right, at the cafeteria table would pick up on dirty tricks like this and then just like throw their milk in this guy's face, right, as a kid. That probably happened a lot to Darth. Like, shut the hell up, Darth. You don't know what you're talking about.
This is what they do. They will give you a response or rebuttal, but then they're changing the parameters of what is being discussed. We're not talking about what's logically possible. We're talking about what is metaphysically possible.
Oh, metaphysically possible. Well, what the fuck does that mean? Right? Like, Jefferson, hey, happy prevaricating. That's what I do. It's what I do. It's good to see you.
Now, I'm going to ask you again. Let's try not to dodge or evade or engage in double talk or play stupid. God does not exist because?
Yeah, the only answer.
That wasn't the same question. The original question was, why are you an atheist? Now he's asking, why can't God exist? Is essentially what he's doing. God doesn't exist because. Is that why can't a God exist, or why doesn't a God exist? Or are you asking, why is it the case that you don't think a God exists? Or why is it the case you think that a God can't exist? Or wouldn't exist? Or didn't exist? Or would never exist? Like, could you, I mean, what the fuck, Darth? What the fuck?
Answer I have to that is that there's no such thing as a necessary being.
How do, and so nothing is necessary?
Again, completely off base, right? Oh, so nothing's necessary. No, he said he doesn't believe in a necessary being. Again, here's the problem, right? So if there's no necessary being, then nothing is necessary. That doesn't follow. You could have a necessary thing. In fact, you could even have a necessary thing that serves as the grounding of all contingent things and states of affairs and not be a being. It wouldn't be a mind or will, right? But if you posit that as an alternative, Darth will say that's incoherent because that's not God. The easiest thing to ask Dorothy Pooh at this point is like, why is that incoherent? Like, I have a reason to think that when you talk about a foundational being, you're talking about it being a necessarily existing being that is a mind with a will and a personality. And I'm not exactly sure that that's something that I can get on board with. Darth has a lot of work to do there in order to do that, right? But he's doing this again, where he's straw manning with the question. I don't think there's a necessary being. Oh, so nothing's necessary? How does that question follow from what the guy just said? The proper follow, if you want clarification, right? The clarifying question, you believe that there's no necessary existing beings, not that there are no necessarily existing things.
Right. There's no particular being or set of beings.
Why does anything exist? Did it pop into exist from nothing?
Well, I think so.
Did anything ever pop into existence from literally nothing? If there is nothing that is fundamentally ultimate and unconditionally non-dependent and non-derivative, you're just saying that there's nothing that
nothing, no one. Someone really needs to hold Darth to this, right? Because now Darth has changed this again. Now he's talking about, well, if there's nothing independent, ultimate, foundational, yada, 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 then nothing else can happen. Not nothing, no one. He doesn't believe in a foundational thing. He believes in a foundational who. A person, a being, a mind, a personality with will and thoughts and choices that takes actions and makes things happen. And he plans stuff. He's anthropomorphized that thing, right? Beyond that fact, right? But the weird thing about this is that he de-anthropomorphizes it in order to gaslight people. Well, there has to be this thing that does that. No. I could believe that as an atheist. Darth can. That's a worldview body double from Darth. Darth needs to hold on to the original thing. There has to be a necessary being, a necessary person, personality, for lack of a better way of alternative of saying it. This is sad.
That's fundamentally absolute. Then why does anything exist? Did it pop into exist from nothing?
Well, if it popped into existence from a necessarily existing thing with no will, would Darth equivocate that to being as if it came from nothing? This is a fundamental flaw in what he's trying to do here. If I believe that there is a fundamental thing, a foundational absolute thing from which all other things derive and depend, that would satisfy what he's talking about here. But he's not talking about what he's actually talking about. He's saying thing, he means person. He means God. He means a being. He's lying to this person, and he's lying to himself if he thinks that this is a good way to argue about the thing that he's positing. He can't prove a necessary existing who. And it makes it easier for him to talk to people and try to challenge them on the necessary existing thing. You're just going to say nothing at all is necessary? No, I'm not saying that no thing is necessary. But I might be more inclined to say no one is necessary. And that's where Darth's getting this wrong. Because he does believe that there is a person that is necessary. One mind, one being is necessary to run and operate this whole show and kickstart the whole thing.
So I think the current set of stuff exists for no reason.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So do you know what that means? That's called bruteness.
I mean, I don't like the word, but yeah, I get where you're going.
Yeah, a bruteness is the stipulation that something exists with literally no explanation externally or internally as to why it exists. Is that your position?
I would say for no reason, yes.
Okay. Do you know what that does? It means that whatever you invoke, therefore, is unintelligible because there's no reason as to what it is.
No, that wouldn't. And here's the problem. Let's assume that maybe that's true. The thing, maybe, but not the who. If I don't know what that thing has in mind, right? And that thing isn't a mind, it didn't have anything in mind, then maybe everything would be unintelligible, like Darth says. But that doesn't follow from the thing that he believes in, because the thing he believes in is a who. It's a person that has a mind. So if I don't know how things work, it doesn't matter because that thing knows what things do. That's the point of presup. And that's the point Darth's supposed to be fucking talking about. And now he's talking about things. You could easily substitute this in there and just hijack his argument and say, aha, you're talking about a thing. If a thing is capable of being foundational and being the source from which all contingent things derive and depend upon, then I don't need to know anything beyond just the positing of that necessary thing. It would, if it's a necessary existing thing upon which all these things derive and depend, then the fact that I know about them is a necessary consequence of that existence. You can just say it's inevitable from how things derive and depend upon the necessary foundation. And Darth believes that because he believes we know those things because of the mind of God. So I'm not exactly sure why this thing, you couldn't just substitute in something without a mind and avoid all these problems with mind. You could avoid all the problems with personality, all the problems with immutability, all the problems with omniscience and omnibenevolence. The entire problem of evil disappears if you believe in a thing, a necessary existing thing upon which all things derive and depend. You just get out of all these problems, which is what Darth is essentially arguing for. But then he smuggles in, it's a who. It's a guy, a smart one with lots of power, who has thoughts and plans and ideas about how things should be. And he really doesn't like it when you have sex weird ways. Ways I happen to think are weird. But trust me, he agrees with me. Don't do that, or else. Because that thing also makes barbecue pits in hell dimensions. Fucking bonkers.
Well, I agree. There's no.
Good. Listen, I don't think you're understanding the consequence of this. There's only two categories that states can be in, right? All states that are not God. Either a state will be creaturely or not. Do you agree with that?
Again, okay, so now he's getting into one of my favorite playthings, the creator-creature distinction. This distinction has theological significance for believers, but it has less significance for somebody outside of it. And Darth very rarely unpacks it. And the one thing that Darth is incapable of doing is recognizing that the creator-creature distinction, just that word choice, is caught up in an enormous number of presuppositions, namely that a creature was made by another thing that is independent, a creator, right? Now, in his mind, the creator necessarily is independent, right? But it doesn't follow that some creatures can't be made by other creatures. Right. So he just posits that this is a necessary relationship to understand if one is going to understand the reality of our world and the metaphysics that undergird it. Cool. Okay. But if one is willing to concede that they believe in a contingent relationship, that there is some kind of necessary absolute, a necessarily existing thing upon which all things derive and depend, but it's not a personality, right? And there is a category distinction between that thing and the contingent things that derive from it, right? Those things, you might be able to call that in a physicalist sense or a materialistic sense or whatever, however, whichever philosophy you wanted to use to posit that as an alternative, that there's something of a creator-creature distinction with that. But it would be inaccurate to call it that, because loaded into the idea of a creator is will. So again, Darth's talking about a who. He's not talking about a fucking thing. You can talk about a thing and start talking about this notion of the distinction between that foundational thing and all the things that it depends, but you got to get rid of the words creator and creature. They're not accurate terms. It's a theological term with lots of baggage in it, right? And if somebody were to point this out to Darth, he would probably throw up on his feet, right? Obviously off camera, he never shows himself, and then fly into a fucking rage. This would be what would happen. He would lose his mind. This is not consistent. This is not good language to use if you're trying to make a point. And he does this kind of stuff constantly. Okay, well, now you need to hear this theological point, and trust me, it's valuable. It's essential to understanding this. No, it's not.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a true dichotomy, but
do you agree with that?
Good fucking Lord. What the shit? Why does he have to agree with it one way or the other? Yeah, and the appropriate answer to that, if you're asked about, if you ever talk to this ding dong and you're asked about the creator-creature distinction, the correct answer is no, I don't agree with that. He's never going to let you expound on it, but you should always say no, you don't agree with that. And the reason that you should say, the primary reason, is that it's a theological concept with lots of baggage that he doesn't have the patience or the charity to unpack for anyone, and he probably doesn't even really understand all the theological implications of it when he's using it anyway, right? He just thinks it's shit hot thing to say in the course of his metaphysical interrogation. Pat says, I saw this on an episode of Star Trek. The Enterprise encountered Apollo, who had left Earth and settled on a remote planet. It's a great episode and about as logical as Darth's argument. I don't remember that one. I don't think I saw every episode of. Is that from the original show? If it's from the original series, then I have seen it. I just don't remember that episode.
I don't believe there's a creator, so I don't believe in a creator.
Okay, okay, you know what? You can fuck off, you little piece of deceptive little garbage. Do you see how evasive they are? You ask them a simple question and they dance around it. They cannot help themselves. Listen, on Judgment Day, okay, when you're standing before Jesus Christ, remember that we Christians tried to warn you, okay? Remember that.
Now this is when you know he's really getting frustrated, right? And this brings up an interesting, another interesting theological point, right? Hear what he said there? Like, you guys won't have an excuse when you die and you see Jesus. Remember, we tried to warn you. Was that what was necessary? Right? Like, is that what they're going to be judged for? Darth really does think this, right? Like, if I don't listen to Darth, then I get what I deserve. That's how proud this guy is. That's how much he's missed the point, right? His words to you and me about the reality of his God and salvation don't mean jack shit without the Holy Spirit. He has to have some concept, some conceptual understanding within his faith that the Holy Spirit has to work on a person's heart in order to change them. That is an extremely important concept called grace, right? And in another meaning of that term, it's something that Darth does not have and never will have, right? But grace, whether it's irresistible or prevenient or whichever versions that you get into it, is necessary in order for that heart to change, right? Darth can tell people, he can scream until he's blue in the face, right, about this. He gets frustrated because people don't believe him and don't accept it, and then he resorts to that childish throwaway. When you meet Jesus after you die, remember, I told you so. Okay, here's my thing. If I die and I do meet Jesus, and it turns out Christianity is correct, and the first thing I have to do is stand before him in some kind of show trial, knowing what I know about the Bible and about theology and about grace and these kinds of things, the first thing on my mind is not going to be, oh, why didn't I just blindly accept what Darth told me, despite the fact that he has the comportment of a deranged wino under an overpass, right? My issue is going to be, yo, Jesus, why didn't you send some of that Holy Spirit grace my way? Why didn't you change my heart, buddy? See, this is one of these examples, right? If Darth believes that Paul is correct when he says that some of us are built for destruction, who is going to stand before him upon judgment day, right? Ministers and preachers and apostles have been making claims like this all the time, and ding-dongs like Darth think that this is literally true. Once you die, all of a sudden, you're going before the docket, and the judge is there, and it's Jesus, and he's going to decide whether you're guilty or you're innocent. Everybody's fucking guilty. The only person that was innocent was Jesus, and he died for your sins. So this metaphor automatically fails. On top of that, you're being judged for something that he died for. Why are you being judged again? The only thing you could be judged for is not being convinced that you needed to believe in him in order for that to have an effect. And if he's going to tell you, no, you did need to believe in that, and that required grace, then your next response should be, why didn't you provide me with that grace? What precisely am I being judged for? To what extent is my salvation under my own power? Especially for Darth Dawkins, who believes what? That autonomous reasoning is an illusion. You cannot trust your autonomous reasoning, but he wants you to use your reasoning to reason to God. This guy's a charlatan. He is a fake. He's a grifter. He's not thinking about his Christianity in any consistent way. He's just on here screaming at anyone that he can scream at in order to get some kind of weird boner, get his rocks off about his faith. This is literally a power trip for him, just an ego trip. And at this point, what I think is fascinating about it is that he's so far gone into this with all of these rants that I don't think that he I don't think he's saved.
Do you see how deceitful they are? You ask them a straightforward question, and they're just craven about not answering it and dancing around it the whole time, gaslighting you, trying to make you to believe that they are answering it when they're not.
Okay, well, when you ask a question and then go back and ask somebody a totally different question and pretend that it was the original question you asked, what would you call that? I would call that maybe that kind of comes across as gaslighting. Now, if you admitted that you forgot the first question, right? If you ask somebody why they're an atheist and then you ask them, God does not exist because, you're not asking the same question. So, Darth needs to really do some reflecting. And yeah, Pat, actually Jesus wasn't the only one. Others in the OT were found blameless before the Lord. Yeah. But the OT is always problematic, right? When Darth gets into these kicks, a lot of these guys do this, right? If somebody like Pat brings up this kind of stuff, well, what about these other people that kind of got this kind of stuff in there, right? I think most of these Christians, most of the apologists would be like, well, that is in there to serve as an example of the kind of redemption we all get when Jesus dies for our sins, right? But we don't all get that redemption. We don't get it, right? The only people that Jesus's death is effective on are the people that, quote unquote, choose to believe it or choose to accept it. Which is an interesting choice of language, right? Because I've been asked both questions. Do you believe that? No. Do you accept it? Sure. Pissed a bunch of Christians off. I did. I can't remember what group I was in. It was a Clubhouse group, or I think it was in a comment thread actually on a YouTube thing, Matt Powell's group or something like that. And they're like, do you believe that Jesus died for your sins? No. What would it take for you to accept that Jesus died for you? Well, I accept it as a concept. Sure. It's fine. If Jesus died, if a guy named Jesus died and thought he was dying for my sins, I accept that. If it turns out that it's the case, that Jesus was actually the Son of God and died for my sins, I accept that, right? Do I believe that's actually what happened? No, I'm not convinced that that's what happened. Can I accept it? Sure. Right? I don't recommend doing that. You'll drive people nuts.
Anybody think I'm being too harsh with this lying pig?
Yeah, I think you're being too harsh with that.
I mean, I think you should give him one more chance.
Oh no, that was the last straw because he was being evasive from the get-go. Or don't you recall?
No, he wasn't being evasive from the get-go, and I can recall it. We just watched it. He wasn't being evasive. And which one is it? Is he being evasive or is he being is he being deceptive, right? Darth just conflates the two, right? And it doesn't matter if somebody's confused by the questions Darth asks, right? If they're confused and they dilly-dally, then they're evasive, therefore they're lying. Like whatever it takes for Darth to excuse yelling into his microphone and losing his temper and muting and kicking people. I had to do it. The person was coming right for me.
Yeah,
Was that
completely evasive.
what was he not from the get-go up until the time that I muted him? Was he not, for the most part, evasive in his responses? Was he not evasive multiple times? Yeah, he was.
Darth just answers it for them. Yeah, he was. Oh, yeah. I'm going to speed this part up because I'm pretty sure this is just Cope. And let's bump this up to 1.25. Foxy before the breakup. Yeah, I forgot that they had a little bit of a falling out. And I think this is before that.
This is a tactic that they pull. This is a strategery. Because you see,
it's strategery. I mean, what do you call it when somebody mispronounces a word that was intentionally mispronounced for comedic effect? I mean, I don't know. I mean, how do you punch yourself in the dick that hard? Pat says, so there are at least 10 OT characters who were found to have been blameless before the Lord and thus didn't need Jesus' redemptive sacrifice. So for those people, it was a complete waste. Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm pretty sure that some of these Christians will go into the proto-evangelion, right? The proto-gospel. And so their redemption, their quote-unquote blamelessness is somehow retroactively figured into Jesus' sacrifice. Don't ask me how they get there, but I've heard people attempt to explain it that way. I think that it's nuts. I think better explanations for it have been, well, given the covenant relationship of things at the time, a person could be found blameless for whatever. To me, it kind of seems like, well, it seems to me like the OT representation of God is that he's a little bit like a king, and if you do enough favors for that king, you can buy your way into heaven, sort of. Right. But by the time you get into Christianity, it's just, no, everybody gets saved by Jesus and believe or burn, which is not the hopeful message that I think Jesus intended, but it's what we got. Or as G-Man says, he was being evasive from the get-go.
Stalemate in an interaction is victory for them. V for victory.
Yeah, that guy was actually trying to answer his questions, and Darth wasn't letting him answer it, and then just started yelling at him. But Darth was all triggered by Xerxes.
There's a lot of graduates from the Xerxes School of Debate out there.
I love that. Can I steal that from you?
Yes, sir.
The Xerxes School of Debate.
Some Chet laughter going on there. I think Darth has just made a romance connection here.
I mean, honestly, it's the same thing. I don't know. What's that? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, it's one minute they play dumb, the next minute going, what do you mean by that? Or I'm not seeing the relevance of that. The King Xerxes School of Debate. I love it.
God, Darth is basic.
Love it. That's great.
Prestigious.
Yeah, we got to think of all the courses that you can take and what degrees you can get, right? Yep. You can get a master. Go to the King Xerxes School of Debate and you get a master's degree in prevarication.
A word that really only Darth Dawkins uses. So why would that be fitting for Xerxes? Like, I mean, comedy. It's just another thing Darth doesn't understand.
We could have the first graduate could do his doctoral dissertation on how I lie my ass off on Discord and am loving it. Oh gosh.
Also doesn't work for comedy because that doesn't work.
You see, if these people don't engage in deceptive responses, they got nothing. Nothing.
I like at this point that he's just complaining. This is just more like him coping out loud, and that nobody's really responding to him. Like, I don't know if they're like, I wonder, because I mean, there's people like Not Fox and a few other people in here. These are all Darth Dawkins well wishers, and for some strange reason, they're not really chiming in at this point. Like they're probably all playing like the new God of War game or something.
All you got to do,
Yeah,
is just don't lie.
Just
don't be evasive.
Don't lie or don't be evasive. Okay, well, when lying and evasiveness are the exact same thing, and they're entirely dependent on whether or not on Darth perceiving them to be dishonesty. Like, how does a person not like? I didn't hear a lie from that other guy, right? He just wasn't answering Darth's loaded questions the way he wanted, and so Darth lost his cool, right? Like he usually does, and in kind of record time.
Just be transparent. In the last couple of days, we've run into a couple of atheists who I can warmly tell you were trying to be very transparent, not evasive or deceptive. And we had great conversations, and we ended up disagreeing. And most of them, do I recall, I complimented them.
Picks or it didn't happen.
On how mature they presented their responses.
Yeah, Bree, at that point, Darth cracked open a beer for his new friend and led him down to his basement. Exactly, yeah. Well, it's only a matter of time, right? Before that guy says something that Darth doesn't agree with and he has to kick him to the curb.
But then again, they're probably dropouts from the King Xerxes School of Debate. What's he doing over here? I thought he was given a special place of honor, a dumpster fire over on Doobie server. Isn't that correct?
Who cares? I mean, okay. Well, that's it for that. Jesus Christ. All right. So I got caught up with those two. Apologies for the tail end of that one, because it was more boring than I remembered. So yeah, Darth is really, he continues to, fall a little bit lower, I think, in everybody's estimation. He's really not getting, he's not getting any better. And I don't think he's going to be talking to Xerxes again anytime soon. And it's not really based on like how he was with Xerxes in that video, but the fact that he was so easily triggered. Like, I mean, I think these are really close to each other. I mean, he was still talking about Xerxes at the beginning of this one, or maybe it had been quite a while and he just brought it back up again. He's been known to do that. But then the other guy, he got so triggered with him so quickly that I think Xerxes kind of got under his skin, even though he didn't really give Xerxes an opportunity to really talk, right? Like he was badgering him pretty decently with his kind of goofy rhetoric about time. But so yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I'll be back with another stream to review. Well, we'll see. I don't know. I haven't seen anything more recently from Tom, but if anybody's got any suggestions since I've been gone, if you want to catch anything, let me know either in the comments or shoot me an email. But that should probably take care of it. Again, thanks everybody in the live chat for showing up. Thanks for the support. As always, live chat's always fun. And Benghazi, make sure to call Didi a boomer because he loves it. Yeah, it's his favorite thing. And with that, take care, everybody, and have a good one. Like I said, I will try to do another one of these. If there is anything to cover, I might cover another one of these tomorrow night. But after that, the rest of the week is going to get kind of busy, so I will probably be detained until, well, not literally detained, but although that could be fun, until sometime next week. So if I don't see you, I won't see you. But otherwise, just keep an eye out for it. I might drop something later on. Take it easy, folks. Have a good one.